About 5 days ago, I told my community how the search for Kylie Rodney was becoming a farce, and I used this particular comment to highlight what the problem was with the coverage of this case. Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. I've repeatedly called out other creators, without actually naming them, for their reckless accusations. Today, an important article on this case appeared in SFGate, a news site based out of San Francisco, California, and one that provided excellent coverage of Laci Peterson's disappearance about 20 years ago. Authored by SFGate managing editor Katie Dowd, Dowd rightly takes aim at the, quote, worst impulses of the internet, end quote, coming to life during a tragedy. Now, I'll put a link to that excellent article in the description, and I really want to encourage you guys to read that article from start to finish. Before we get to the rest of this episode, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So, in her article, she writes, quote, from the beginning, the disappearance of Kylie Rodney had all the makings of a major national news story. A sweet, smiling 16-year-old vanishes without a trace from a rowdy high school party. Concerned law enforcement announces it's possible she was the victim of an abduction. Days pass and clues fail to materialize. And in the absence of details from investigators, the internet rabble fills the void. End quote. Are you part of that internet rabble? Am I? If you feel yourself blushing, maybe it's a good sign. Maybe it means you've got a conscience after all. If you don't, perhaps it's because you lost your soul a long time ago. Now, I hope Katie Dowd doesn't mind me referring to her article in some depth, and Katie Dowd might be a good person to actually have on the show. We don't really interview a lot of people. But she might be a voice to address this particular issue, and it is an issue, directly and in person. In any event, Katie Dowd writes, quote, I've covered nearly 100 missing person cases and followed countless more, but I've rarely seen an online furor as heartless as the one surrounding Kylie. Within a few days, the internet speculation and conjecture became its own content machine. End quote. Now, I've got to say, I wouldn't say the same thing. I wouldn't say I haven't seen online furor as heartless as this before. I think it was preceded by Depp versus Heard. I think we've seen it also in the Chris Watts case. Anyway, she goes on to say, quote, within a few days, the internet speculation and conjecture became its own content machine. Some YouTube channels pumped out multiple videos a day, spending hours speculating wildly about the case. End quote. Now, if you think about that, it's not just thinking that it could be this or it could be that. It's speculating for hours on theories that are actually based on not much, not real substance. And so I want to ask you, and you don't have to answer directly, but do some self-inspection, be a bit introspective. Were you part of that? Were you part of that hour-long internet speculation and conjecture? Dowd goes on to say, quote, one channel even live-streamed an interview with one of Kylie's friends, a minor who should be protected from, not subjected to, the scrutiny of strangers, end quote. And that's one thing that I think very many people forgot in this whole situation is these are minors. They're not the same as adults. They don't have the same capacities. And yet they were treated by adults as almost as equals. And almost forgetting, oh, weren't you a teenager once? Didn't you make errors once? Don't you offer them, I won't say special treatment, but doesn't one bear that in mind, that you are dealing with minors here, and that in the same way we wanted Kylie to be protected, well, what about the minors around her? Now, I remember around the time that Sammy gave her interview, coming out of the gym at night and thinking, this is the time that she gave the interview, but I didn't actually know that she'd given it. but simply thinking this case is happening. I wonder if I should warn her friends, just in a sort of a broad way, don't speak to social media. And this thought just sort of rang like a bell through my mind. But obviously I was too late. When I looked again, Sammy already had. Anyway, Katie Dowd continues. She writes, searching Kylie's name on YouTube yields a horrifying array of clickbait thumbnails and titles like Kylie Rodney, things are not adding up, ! And how is this not a red flag? End quote. Now, I think it's important to point out that it's not only the titles that are clickbait, but the thumbnails as well. And I have to say, as I read through Dowd's article, I sincerely hope she didn't see me as part of that heartless, mindless, thoughtless rabble. And I sincerely hope you feel the same thing. You are wondering, am I part of this? I don't want to be. Or does it just not resonate at all? Early on, I recognized the coverage of Kylie Rodney's disappearance quickly and almost automatically conforming to what is now a well-worn formula on YouTube. To monetize true crime, turn it into a witch hunt. Turn the volume up on everything. It's what worked in Depp vs. Heard. Turn the search for truth, the apparent search for truth, and the hunger for information into hate views by weaponizing every little thing into a search for shadows and evil. And in the apparent effort to save or protect or #find Kylie, who cares which other young lives are destroyed or run roughshod over in the process? More grist for the YouTube mill, isn't it? And by the way, to say run roughshod over it means to completely ignore the opinions, rights, or feelings of others. And I was seeing this happening in real time, and I have to say I was appalled, and I said I was appalled. I hope Katie Dowd doesn't mind me emphasizing another paragraph of her incisive article, because I truly believe it's well past their sell-by date that true crimers do a lot of introspection. She writes about them weaving, quote, elaborate conspiracy theories centering on the actions of Kylie's friends the night she went missing. And she is really accusing these creators of literally going after Kylie's friends, those people closest to her, accusing one after the other of lying or of leaving out important information, or of acting in a way that's suspicious and being part of some kind of conspiracy, conspiring about Kylie's disappearance. And I saw this sort of mean girls hypothesis that a few of her girlfriends came together to do away with her based on absolutely no evidence. And when I saw one particular channel doing this, I was appalled and furious, and I actually wrote a comment in chat, something I almost never ever do, only for that comment to magically disappear as though it was never there. Of course, nothing changed. Me sort of putting up my hand and saying, guys, I don't think this is, think about what you're doing. Nothing changed. No, I'm going to carry on what I'm doing. Who are you? Oh, look at this mainstream article. Is that going to change anything? I certainly hope so. I am pleased to say one moderator did seem to have a change of heart on one particular channel and handed in her resignation, but I've got to ask, no one else? Or anybody else? ? In her article, she goes on to say that these theories do not bear repeating because they have no basis in reality. And that's what they are pretending to have. You may remember on a previous live stream, I held up 2 swimming pool boys that sort of looked kind of similar, both blue and white, both with some sort of imperfections in their outlines, but actually different. The one a shader lighter than the other one. One of them is mine and another one isn't, right? The one as a basis in reality, it's something that is mine. The other thing doesn't. It doesn't belong to me. And so she goes on to write, the names of multiple minors are now all over the internet, in YouTube comments and Twitter, Instagram, TikTok replies, linking them to the tragedy that will haunt them for the rest of their lives. It's quite a sensitive way of seeing this tragedy. as these are youngsters, real people, real flesh and blood figures. And although she doesn't repeat what was going on there in any detail, those names that were brought up were Sammy, and Sammy especially, Mags, Kylie's best friend, Jagger, her ex-boyfriend, and others. Even a parent or two came into the crosshairs. When Kylie was found 16 days, pretty much exactly where you'd expect to find her, if there wasn't any foul play, social media dug in their heels, insisting someone was still to blame. And videos come out just in the last hour or two saying that whoever it's directed to are even more guilty. Don't let reality get in the way of, don't let new facts or reality get in the way of your witch hunt. The fact is, social media wanted someone to be to blame. That's how witch hunts, once popular half a century ago, work. Incredibly, in an age that's supposed to be about information, technology, and civilization, about being educated and, having just far more information than any other era in human history, we somehow seem to have regressed into the backwoods of the Dark Ages. It's 1609 to 1614 all over again. In her article, Dowd writes about the guilt that these youngsters very likely feel for their friend. And this has now been compounded, in her words, by people now accusing them of intentionally harming Kylie. What do you think that does for their mental health? And someone left a comment, her name's Julia, I just want to repeat it. She talks about there's an element of us getting the media we deserve, by which I mean, she says there's a codependent relationship in a way between scrupulousness creator and bored, coarsened and callous viewer, enjoying a witch hunt as if these weren't even real people. And I did actually put up a poll during this whole tragedy while it was unfolding saying, is true crime entertainment? Is it a joke? And some people said, yes, it is entertainment. How things have changed since the good old days when defamation was defamation and journalists knew to be careful making unsubstantiated claims. In the internet Wild West, apparently such laws don't apply unless you're Amber Heard. And even well-meaning people, this is also from the article, she talks about even people who've got good hearts, who are nice people, piled onto these conspiracies, tagging sheriff's officers, creating sort of a maelstrom of, if you're saying, why didn't they find Kylie? Well, you kind of had law enforcement chasing their own tails thanks to social media. She also emphasizes that no friend of Kylie's has ever been a person of interest in this case, and repeats what I've kind of been saying all along as well. It's long been evident that the most likely scenario was that she got into a car, possibly intoxicated, and made a mistake that killed her. Since when has social media been qualified to identify persons of interest? Since when has the court of TikTok been empowered to read law enforcement the Riot Act? Social media should take a leaf out of the book of law enforcement, not the other way around. And honestly, I think law enforcement were nudged into the possibility of an abduction by social media, because I'm sure law enforcement are also looking at it. And so she refers in her article also to real-life implications for online fear-mongering. Do you remember Morpheus once asked rhetorically,
"This isn't real."
What is real?
Morpheus said this in response to Neo facing the notion that his reality was being conjured by a computer program.
Ironically, this is not far from the truth.
The caveat is that it's human beings using machines to manipulate each other. Somehow lying is worth more to the algorithm than truth. And I think in a short sentence, that summarizes what is wrong with our world today. Ask yourself, is true crime still true crime? As Captain America once asked,
with it on our side.
Is it? Are you on our side?
is true crime on our side? Is true crime true? Is true crime real? is true crime real crime? I sincerely hope the true crime community wakes up, those that are asleep anyway. I sincerely hope you won't join the witch hunts to come, because I can assure you that's the modus operandi now that makes money, what I call the Nicole Kessinger school of true crime. I sincerely hope when you see a witch hunt springing up out of the ether, or worse, find you're in one, you'll defect or confront or do something. To not oppose this tsunami of mindless rebel is to be overcome by ignorance, hate and fear, and to actually be part of the rebel, to be part of this rebellion against truth and facts and reality. As if there isn't enough of all of that in the real world, in these cases that we're covering, in this case, that we have to add to it. We have to add to the misery, ignorance, hate and fear unnecessarily, and out of a place of incomprehension, unconsciousness, or some creators' cynical opportunism. I must also look in the mirror repeatedly and ask, are you becoming one of them? If you are, turn back. Are you an authentic voice in the true crime landscape? Are you? And then this is directed to you. Are you? 5 days ago I wrote, I feel social media does more a disservice to true crime now that, for the most part, social media can't really accurately refer to itself as true crime. In other words, I was criticizing the genre that I really belong to, a genre that I joined, a genre that has morphed into something I don't recognize anymore. True crime is related to crime and criminal cases, of course, but there's very little genuine or true or real about it. Very little. The most popular true crime in true crime isn't true. And sadly, that's a reflection not just of the creators, but their audience as well. They're playing to a crowd and playing to what the crowd wants. The crowd needs to change as well. As the wise Obi-Wan Kenobi once said,
who's the more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows him?
Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.